My this thing is visible correctly.
Hello, sir. So today
Hello,
we
good
have,
evening.
good evening, and today we have Dr. Prabhat Ranjan with us. So it's an honor to interview you.
Thank you.
You're someone who has legit devoted his life to science and making this world a better place. You're also a person who's worked in so many fields and never stopped being curious. And I genuinely appreciate that about you. Um,
Thank you.
so yeah, let's start talk like begin with your education. So you have
Right.
studied in world's top three like very prestigious universities, from IIT Kharagpur to Delhi University to UC Berkeley. So what difference did you find in all these three universities, and what was its uniqueness?
So I would like to add a fourth institute. That was my schooling done at Netarhat School,
Okay, so
which is near Ranchi in Jharkhand. It was a Gurukula style education system, whereas to live in ashram, we used to do all the work ourselves. We live in ashram. My ashram was named Nalanda Ashram.
okay,
And at the age of 10, I had gone there. So there was a lot of learning that was there in that school. So I must not forget that school. It has been responsible for a lot of things that I've done. From there, I went to IIT Kharagpur, and as you might have noticed that I actually did physics and not engineering because that is what I
yeah,
was interested during from my school days. Now, normally people make their mind and then change it, but I was one who wanted to stick to what I had decided. If I look at these three institutions, IIT Kharagpur was an autonomous body, which is already well known. It was the first IIT that was set up in India in
okay,
1950s, early 1950s. Delhi University was affiliating university, but which had a large number of colleges within it. But our education system was in the university itself. And the University of California, of course, has a long, long history. It was one of the top universities of the world. In fact, in the physics, at my time, it was ranked number one with 7 Nobel Prize winners in the physics department, 7 in chemistry, and so on. So we used to interact with the Nobel Prize winner, day in and out. You get to meet them in corridor, in common hours, happy hours, it was called, and so on. Each one of them has left imprint on my mind. If I look at most of our friends were in engineering department, but first year we had common courses.
yeah,
I found the education system was quite good, and we had, for example, even at that time, we had open book exams,
okay,
and which was considered very tough. In fact, I used to score better in those, and but many people used to fail in open book exams. So normally, when you hear of open book exam, you think that okay, it's going to be very easy.
yeah.
But actually, the problems that are asked are not really easy because it's not written in the book somewhere that you can go through.
So you have to use
And
your
number of
brain,
the students,
and
what
yeah,
they, yeah, you have to understand the concept properly. So you can't do that in the exam hall. So there were a number of such things that we were used to that from 1976 that I went there. Delhi University, of course, was a large university system with its own plus and minus points. We had very good faculty members in physics department. That was one of the reasons I moved into Delhi University. I think at my time, there were 23 electives available in different fields of physics. And I actually wanted to work in astrophysics and cosmology part. So we had courses there. Then in fact, after doing my master's and before I went to US, I was holder of National Science Talent Search Award of NCRT. So as part of that, I had a summer camp in TIFR in Mumbai in 1981. There I worked with Professor Jayanta Bishan Narlikar, who is a very famous astrophysicist across the world. His theory of steady state theory of universe is very well known. So I worked with him, and then I went to US. But then something happened, and I probably would mention that here. So all my SOP and everything was prepared according to my interest in astrophysics and black holes.
yeah,
And I got admission on that basis at Berkeley. I think it was in March of 1981. I still remember when I got that offer, and it also had a teaching assistantship. So financially also I was supported. I'd gone to meet my professors to inform them about it, who had given me recommendation letters. But all in the event, So I was waiting outside that hall to when they came out that I informed them. They were also quite happy because Berkeley is, as I said, that was the #1 in the world. When I was about to go to Berkeley, I was taking a flight from India. That was my first flight of the life. I'd never been on a flight. Nowadays, it's easy to do that. But at that time, it was a big event. I had 20, 30 people had come to see me off. The flight was sometime in the morning, 4 o'clock. We were to fly to Japan, then wait there for 20 hours, and then fly from there to San Francisco. So we were waiting in Jawaharlal Nehru University campus. One of my uncles was doing PhD there. So we, obviously 20, 30 people cannot be inside a room. So we all waiting at the outside in the boundary. And that's where one of my uncle, who actually had supported half of my travel, he asked me this question that what are you going to do? What kind of research? So at that particular moment at midnight, when I'm about to leave the country, something struck inside me saying that will astrophysics or black holes work going to help India in some way? So I responded to him without having ever thought about it, that either I'll work in nuclear fusion or in space sciences. I'd never thought about it, never planned it, but somehow it just came out of me. And when I went to Berkeley, actually, while I did attend and participate in the events in astrophysics department, but I eventually I decided to move into nuclear fusion. So that's where I did that. And at that time, I did not even know that I had something going on in India. So something happened inside me. I just said that. Fortunately, by the time I was coming back, nuclear fusion work had started in India. So I started participating there. So Berkeley was a very interesting place. One thing I always tell about Berkeley is that it was a different kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
It was a rebel atmosphere. And if you had some very weird idea, you'll find at least one more person with similar weird idea.
Okay.
So we had Hare Rama, Hare Krishna group going around in the campus at 12 o'clock doing Shuddhi. We had one guy who used to, there was a student union plaza. The one guy in polka dot dress would be lying there on the road doing nothing. So, I mean, what was his purpose? Nobody knew. Somebody was declaring that he's a god. And so there are all kind of things happening there. So it's a very happening campus. I have visited a couple of times back. Last year also I was there in that campus. So it's a wonderful place with, of course, as I said, that with a lot of flexibility in the system. I remember there was a batchmate of mine. She was from IIT Mumbai. She was in chemistry, doing PhD in chemistry, but her supervisor allowed her to take all physics courses. So first year of the physics courses that we were taking, she was also allowed to take, although she was in chemistry department. So that kind of flexibility was there in the system, which made it possible for people to explore various things. Just now, I think we are starting to see that change happening in the country, in India also some kind, but it's been almost 40 years since then. So I've had a good experience of different kind of education institutes. Yeah, thank you.
So which one do you think, in which university do you think the environment was the most competitive?
I'm a person, when you think of competitiveness, people think of who is going to be topping and the examination system and so on. I'm a person who was never bothered about that. And although I topped in 1970 when my Netrata school entrance test was there, it was a statewide test. I topped the state in that. But that was never my purpose of doing that. In fact, a very interesting incident happened. One of my close friends from school days, all of us went to IIT Kharagpur.
Yeah.
We had a argument, typical argument. We were discussing whether getting marks, but doing better in examination shows you that you're more intelligent or it is not. And he was of the opinion that yes, it is indicating you're more intelligent. And I was of the opinion, no, it's not. It depends on your interest, depends on how much you prepare and so on. So we had a bet actually. And we were giving the same exam of mathematics.
Okay.
And we said that whoever gets more marks in this will be more intelligent. As luck would have it, out of 60, I got 59 and he got 57.
Oh.
Although he used to top in the department, his own department and the IT itself. But it's just a matter of chance. So competitiveness, you have to define. My purpose is that you have to explore what is your talent. And there's a theory of multiple intelligence. and that says that every human being, there are 8 to 9 different kind of intelligences. So based on that, you should actually look at your career choices. And for example, let's say that I went to Berkeley, did my PhD, and most of the people stay back. My three of us had gone together. We were same schoolmate. We went to IT Kharagpur together. We went to US together in 81. All of us did PhD. Two of them are there. I'm the only one who came back. So my purpose was different. And so I was not in trying to compete with others. I had my own set. So that's why I would not really want to judge them on competitiveness. But yes, we had to work very hard in Berkeley. There was a book by Jackson. In fact, Jackson was my head of department in physics department in Berkeley, who was offered me the admission. His book was very famous worldwide.
Okay.
And that book we did in Delhi University also. When I went back again, we had to do the same thing. But a lot more problems we had to do. So we actually had to work hard till 2 a.m. in the night and so on to finish all the things. In Berkeley also, there was a very interesting thing about examinations. Actually, we had different kind of examinations. Well, of course, open book exams were there, but also there were take-home exams, where actually you are given the question paper and you can work for it for 7 days and then come back and submit the things.
So how different were they? Like how difficult or different were the questions from the open book? Were they more tough or what was it?
Yeah, so it's open book in the sense that you have access to all the resources, except that you get enough time. So mostly it is problem solving. So you have to understand the concept. It is not something that you can memorize. Normally, we have been focusing on memory-based thing, where you have to memorize something and you have to remember that and go in the exam hall and give it. But in this case, you have to understand the concept and solve the problem. So you will not be able to copy something from somewhere.
Yeah.
So the problems were there. The only thing was there was an honesty that had to be there. In India, if you do it, for example, now you will find that you will get carbon copy of each other submitted in the thing. So this happened. So those were very interesting experiences that we had. And of course, we had to compete in the sense that best talent from all across the world were present in addition to the US talent. And so it was very interesting. We made a lot of good friendship there with different people. Of course, we had a lot of fun as well, but I think everybody is doing quite well who were there.
Yeah. So you also mentioned how UC Berkeley was comparatively had more creative students and it was a lot more flexible. So do you think creativity and flexibility, both these things combined, leads to better results? And is that the reason why India is comparatively behind the other foreign institutes?
Yeah, you're right in some sense. Actually, we started following a very rigid system. There's history behind it. If you recall, we had a Guru Shishya Parampara, where the disciples will go to the Guru's place, ashram, and they will stay there. They will do everything there. They were family members of the Guru. And in that process, they used to learn from the Guru. Somebody will learn and finish whatever Guru had to teach in 6 months. Somebody will take 5 years. Somewhere down the Industrial Revolution, when it took place in 1750s, at that time, we needed skilled workers, but large number of them. All of them have to do the same thing, large numbers of them. So the education system that British brought to us was actually based on that. And we have been following that, which was a rigid system. You had it was like assembly line. You put somebody in a course program 3 years, 4 years, and they go out of the system. They may have learned everything. They may not have learned everything. You get A grade, B grade, C grade, D grade, but you still pass the course. So that is system that we have been following, and it's very rigid system. And that means that what you may have learned in your school days or college days, your life, you expect that you will be only doing the same thing, but that does not happen. Things keep changing. And so we're still following the rigid system. The new education policy is trying to make it more flexible.
Yeah.
But so far, more than 70 years have passed after independence. We have been following the rigid system. So that is actually killing the creativity and innovation potential. In fact, sometimes if you look at a child, for example, the child is very curious, ask you a large number of questions. But when they go into school, actually, we kill their creativity. We stop them from asking questions. The teachers will scold them, and we're asking too many questions and so forth. So yes, right now our system is killing the creativity and innovation potential, which is also affecting our manufacturing potential. We were talking about competing with China and all that, and this is actually the key factor which is there in our ecosystem. One more thing I'd like to point out in this is that I've been promoting working with hands. So I have, in fact, Facebook page called One in One, where I say that every child must be asked to work at least 1 hour with hand in 1 week. Things which we consider dirty, cleaning dishes, cleaning toilets. I was used to that from childhood. I've done that. So that means nothing is untouchable for me. I'm able to do everything myself.
Yeah.
So that kind of system actually makes sure that you actually work on physical systems. You can dirty your hands and you can work on. I think that is also very important for innovation and manufacturing. So you will see that all the major US companies like HP and so on, they start from garage and they had to work very hard. And obviously not that they were given a lot of money and platter, and they work from that. They work hard. So that is the thing that also is very, very important in that.
Sir, so like since you mentioned like the creativity of a child is killed when he enters school, and but you, so when you were deciding your college, in one of your interviews you mentioned how your parents, everyone or family wanted you to take up electrical engineering, but you were so determined that no, I will take physics, and so like you had so much pressure, but how were you so confident? Because at that age people, their minds just flicker. So what was it, your passion? What were you feeling exactly? How did you follow it so much clear
So
with
I'll just correct
clarity?
you actually. Yeah, I'll just correct you. First, when as a child, I was a very quiet child. I will not speak. And I was also very lazy to write. So my mother will always be worried that what this boy is going to do. Neither speaks nor writes.
But quiet
But
people are
somehow I had the,
yeah, quiet people are considered very observant. You observe everything.
well, I don't know what I was. Maybe I was observant. So when my elder brother used to study, I used to actually learn from that. When the age of 3 years or so, and I used to learn from him. A teacher teaching him, and I would be just watching him and learning from him. So I actually, to be frank, I went to my school in ashram style thing, Gurukul style school at the age of 10. So I was away from my parents for a long time, except in the vacation periods. I never asked them what I am going to do. So it was never pressure from my parents because I never asked them. So when I went to Kharagpur, actually, I had not even told them, except of course when we went to Kharagpur to take admission, my father came along. The examination that I'd given and all that, I never asked him. It was all my choice.
Okay.
And I wanted to do physics. Now that time the computers were not there, so the admission process was manual. So you had to go inside the room where there were all IIT representatives were there, and at that time IIT, 5 IITs were there, and one BHU IT was there at that time. It was not IIT at that time. So 6 of them used to do admission, common admissions.
Okay.
So representatives from each of them were there, professors from there. And you go there, sit on a chair, and they will ask you, okay, what course you want, and you tell. And if they will check if it is available, they will say yes. If not, they will suggest you take another course. So I said that, okay, I want physics. So they said, you're making a mistake. You should be taking engineering and so on and so forth. I kept on insisting that, give me physics. And they kept arguing for that. And then they called my father that, this boy is making a mistake. He doesn't know what he's doing. So let's do one thing. We'll give him electrical engineering, which is very close to physics. And then we'll change him to physics if he wants later on, but we can't do it reverse way. So I said, okay, I got fed up and said, okay, let me get out of this place. Let them give admission electrical. When I came back to join Kharagpur, the very first day I went and wrote an application that please change me to physics. So for 15 days, I attended the electrical courses, but it was all common course at that time. So it didn't make a difference. And so I changed. So it was not parents for my pressure, but it was the faculty members sitting in the counseling room who were suggesting that I'm making a mistake. So I never had pressure from my family members, and partly I never asked them, and partly they also did not allow me. And as childhood, they didn't expect much from me. But then age of 10, I topped the state and so on. And so they also had faith in me that I would not be doing something wrong. So I never proved them wrong that way.
But why do you think people were so against you taking physics? Like, what was their mindset back then about this subject? And how were you so confident? Like, did you have a backup plan or in mind, or it was just your gut feelings that, okay, I can do this?
No, so I was already involved in my school days also. I was involved with learning about particle physics and other things. I used to give talks to my students. I was not a teacher, I was also a student, but to my other students. And I used to be involved in science projects and always had this interest in doing things by myself and not going to the details. And so in the school days itself, I had declared, if you ask my childhood friends from school, they will tell you that, no, I wanted to be a scientist. So that decision I had taken long back. I never changed that. I never had two plans, plan A and plan B. It was always one single plan. And so I was always, it's never in my life, I have said that I will have two, three choices and I'll try this or that and so on. So it was always one. And I worked for that. Unfortunately, like even when I came back from US, there was a big decision for many people, but I never had any thoughts about that. When I came back, I did not have a proper job. I had got a job, a temporary job for 1 year, but I was confident that I will prove myself. So, it's never been there. So whatever decisions I've taken, it's never been without, with doubts. It was always with confidence. So I have confidence in myself. I'm dedicated to certain things and I follow that up. And I've been doing that till now. Of course, I faced problems because of those, but I'm willing to take those risks.
That's really inspiring. And sir, so could you tell us what you're doing currently?
Yeah, so right now I'm Vice Chancellor of D.Y. Patil International University in Pune. You can see the logo at my back and also the photograph of the gate. This is a campus. D.Y. Patil Group is very famous in Maharashtra. With more than 100 institutions under its banner, with more than 1 lakh students studying under this. The first engineering college, which is now part of our campus, was set up in 1984. This university was started in 2018 as a state private university. I was in Delhi for 5 years, heading India's technology think tank, TIFAC. So at that time, I had worked out Technology Vision 2035.
Yeah.
And the Technology Vision 2035, let me see if I can show, maybe it is coming in reverse or it is coming correctly. Yes. So this document we prepared and it was released. Prime Minister wrote the foreword to this.
Yeah.
In fact, he also launched this document. So if I don't know if the camera would show this, yeah, you can probably see.
Yeah, the photograph.
He wrote the foreword to this document. Yeah, and he launched the document also in 2016 on January 3rd, Indian Science Congress, and later on, Prime Minister's office directed all the ministries in the Department of Government India to follow this document. So this document actually is a vision for the country, and this follows the Technology Vision 2020 document that Dr. Kalam had when he was there as a chairman of TIFAC. This was done in 1996. And my predecessor at that time was Dr. Y.S. Rajan. At my time, Dr. Anil Kakotkar was chairman of TIFAC, and I was heading the organization as a executive director. So this document is a vision for the country along with 12 roadmaps in different sectors. If you look at the roadmaps, I had, out of the 12 roadmaps, 6 were released when I was there, and a few more have been released after I have left 2 years back. I had put education on the top. So for example, I don't know, okay, let's see if one can see this. This will show education right on the top. The very first one is education.
Education.
And then I had healthcare and agriculture and so on. So I had realized that education is the key to India's progress. So I wanted to come back to education sector. So fortunately, this university was looking for a vice chancellor around the time my tenure was getting over. So the day my tenure in Delhi was over, the next day I was here. In fact, I took a flight from Delhi airport right after my office and came to Pune, and we had a press conference next day to announce the university. So I'm the founding vice chancellor of this university, and my purpose is actually to set up a new paradigm of education in the country. Just to give an example, we started a computer science engineering program last year. So we had a BTech computer science engineering program last year.
Yes, it was very well appreciated.
Right. So that program has actually changed computer science engineering curriculum in the country as a whole. Because when we prepared that program, I shared that information with AICTE, and I was part of the committees of AICTE. I was also part of a committee which was to decide the future of AICTE itself. what is called Perspective Plan Committee. So I was knowing them. So I said that I'm making a plan. You should see if you like that plan, and if you like it, you can extend it everywhere. So on 21st February 2019, they had a meeting, but 1.5 years back, they had a meeting of their All India board, where they discussed that plan and they liked it. So they sent me an appreciation letter. And also they formed a committee of which I was a member to revamp the computer science engineering curriculum of the country. And based on that, actually this year, number of courses that have been approved by AICTE, you will see a lot of resemblance from our program. Of course, it's not as flexible as I could make it because of certain rigidity in the AICTE system. But for example, you have to make a choice the time of admission about what specialization you will do. In my case, I leave that decision to a later stage, so say 2 years, your common courses. Toward the end of 2 years, you have to move into your specialization. So that system we have implemented here. Along the same line, this year I have started BTech Bioengineering program with 4 tracks. So computer science engineering, we started with 10 tracks, along with integrated master's possibility, integrated master's in design possibility, depending on what specialization you choose. This time we started BTech Bioengineering program with 4 tracks, one in biochemical engineering, one in biomedical engineering, cell and tissue engineering, and food biotechnology. And similarly, we started MBA program this year with 3 tracks. One is on fintech, then it is on supply chain management and business analytics. And we had also a Bachelor's of Design course, which was already started, but we have made a 2-track system with graphics design and user experience design. So slowly we have tried to change all my programs that we are offering here into this track system, which we implemented last year. And that is very helpful for the students to be able to choose the specialization after they know what the subjects are and they've had some kind of knowledge. Normally you're forced to make a choice even before you had some knowledge. So that's the system that I've set up in the country, along with many other aspects of that, which I may or may not have time to go into details today, but they're on our website, they're on my blog also.
Sir, you when you started the answer, you mentioned about Dr. Kalam's vision. So what do you think, according to Dr. Kalam's 2020 vision, were we able to meet all his expectations, or like where did we lack?
So it's a very good question, because when I was preparing Technology Vision 2035, even before I joined TIFAC in 2013, we had a discussion with the scientists. So there was some delay between my selection and the formal process of government, because it has to be approved by Appointment Committee of Cabinet, which Prime Minister is chairman of that. So it took some time for paperwork to happen. So in the meantime, I was interacting with TIFAC scientists. So I asked them this question, that what has happened since Technology Vision 2020? Are we along that line, or we are somewhere else? Or what is the point of preparing the documents if nobody looks at it?
Yeah.
So once I joined, then we actually took up this aspect that let's compare India's progress with respect to Technology Vision 2020. So in the document Technology Vision 2035, I don't think you can see it properly, but maybe you can see some horses.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Infographics, which actually compares India's progress with respect to the Technology Vision 2020 document. We divided into 4 sectors. One is India galloping, India cantering, India trotting, and India walking. Okay. So the India galloping one is the one where India has made progress much beyond what we had visualized in 2020.
Okay.
These are in 5 sectors. So we have gone beyond that. So these are in the space, atomic energy, and missile sector. Then you have pharma and biotechnology sector, where again we have done quite well. And then there's the ICT sector, where we have done quite well, where I say that it was partly because of global technological changes that were happening across the globe, from which we gained. At the same time, we contributed to that. So you see that a lot of IT expertise went out of India actually to participate in that process. So these 5 we identified is where we galloped. And then there's similarly India cantering and trotting and India walking. Walking part is where we have done actually poorly. And one of the poor area is healthcare sector. Then there's advanced sensors area where we have not done much. And at the same time, there's also about waterways, where we had visualized that 8 to 9% of passenger and goods traffic will happen through waterways. And this was done in 1996. but nothing much happened. When the current government, the first term of NDA came in 2014, then this government, especially I would like to name Mr. Nitin Gadkari, he took good interest in the document.
Okay.
And waterways, we started plan of more than 100 waterways. Out of that, actually, I think a dozen of them are already operational. National Water is one from Varanasi to Haldia is already operational. I think in Guwahati, in Brahmaputra also, the second one is operational, and maybe 11 more are operational. So what
it started around which year?
So our document was prepared, was started sometime back 2010-11, but final version we submitted to Prime Minister's office in 2014. 2014, sometime September first version. Then we had made some change in design. I think November 2014 we submitted. It took about a year's time for Prime Minister's office to go ahead to this document, but it was circulated to the various ministers and so on. And because they were in touch with me, especially Mr. Nitin Gadkari. So for example, Hyperloop technology that came in was because of this document and many other areas. We also have 10 challenges in the document. So if you look at the progress of India with respect to Technology Vision 2020, it's a mixed bag, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. And this document, Technology Vision 2035, is slightly different than the Technology Vision 2020. Technology Vision 2020 talked about developed India. Dr. Kalam, till his last breath, talked about that document. When I met him in 2013, he told me that Technology Vision 2020 is Typhoid's baby, so I should take care of it, make sure that what we have visualized happens. But when we were preparing this document, Technology Vision 2035, we moved from India to Indians. We've moved focus away from country to citizens. And that's a big change. So we said that it does not matter who is where, what status in terms of finances or location, does not matter. Everyone's quality of life must be met. So we moved from India to Indian. So this was a major shift that has actually led to the way the document has been formulated.
Sir, you mentioned how you brought changes in the software syllabus, computer science syllabus in the university, and so how is it different from the leading institutes like IITs? Because students would still prefer doing their computer science engineering from IITs rather than, because they don't really care about the syllabus is what I've seen. They mostly care about the brand or the name of the institute. Like, what do you think?
Right.
What's your opinion? And would people be attracted more to syllabus?
Your questions are actually, there are two parts.
Yeah.
One is what is the difference between the curriculum that I have, and second is that are students opting for that? Okay, these two are separate questions. I'll deal with them separately. So one thing, even if you go to IIT or when I went to IIT, you have to make your choice at the time of admission as to which discipline you're going to work in. Right? And that's why I had a fight with my counselors that I wanted to do physics, and they were telling me to take electrical. But suppose there was a system where you could make this choice later on, then it's much more flexible, because as a child you may not know this. So of course, what I did was that when we were, I was part of the committee of Perspective Plan Committee of AICT. The committee's recommendations were that we should not create any more new disciplines except in 3 areas.
One, sir, I could not hear. Could you repeat? Could you say it loudly?
When I was member of the AICT committee, Perspective Plan Committee of AICT in 2017, it was the committee recommended that we should not open new engineering branches except in computer science engineering, mechatronics, and aeronautical engineering. And we should try to convert other disciplines where student demand is less into these new disciplines. So when I was starting engineering program in my campus, I only started with computer science engineering. Okay? But I did a worldwide survey actually through LinkedIn. I got more than 50,000 people viewing that and giving hundreds of comments from all over the world, including Silicon Valley, other places, Bangalore, Pune, Ahmedabad, Delhi, and different parts of the world. And based on that, I made the system. So this is a very flexible system. You don't have to make a choice as to what kind of specialization you will do. So you will choose, you will get a degree in computer science engineering. After first 2 years, you are going to your track. Now track here means that it's like you have gone to railway station and there are different tracks available to you on which different trains are standing. You get into one of the trains. You can make a choice that which train I'm getting into. But once you get into that train, you have to reach the destination. It's not that in between you can change the destination. So first 2 years you get grounded into the foundational courses, and then you choose one of the tracks which are specialization tracks like artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, IoT, robotics, and so on. So a lot of flexibility I brought into this. And you suppose you choose, let's say, data science, you'll do 8 to 9 courses related to this. That means your depth will be much more. If I go to IIT, probably if I make choices, these are through electives, you probably will get 1 or 2 electives related to these. But here you're getting 8 to 9. And so your knowledge will be much more in depth. One more major change that was there was that when I was in IIT Kharagpur, that time it was a 5-year program. We used to go after 11th.
Yeah.
But the first year used to be common. So you would typically be doing physics, chemistry, mathematics. Afterwards, it became from, we were going after 12th and 4-year courses became, the first year still remained same physics, chemistry, mathematics. But that means that you are doing 1 more year extra of the physics, chemistry, mathematics, again coming back and doing the same thing. In some sense, it is a wastage. It's continued till now with some changes. So I felt that it was not necessary. This change was actually started in Gandhinagar, in Dhirubhai Amman Institute of ICT, where actually made these changes. Later on, some of the triple IITs also followed this. So I did the same thing. I changed the curriculum completely in the first 2 years also. We also, like if you do computer course, you will typically be taught C or C++ programming in the first semester. We started with Python actually because Python is the choice of language for artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And so we made many changes, including we have brought in fabrication labs. So if you go to engineering colleges, you will find there's a workshop, mechanical workshop, where you do filing, you have to do cutting and all kind of things, which I used to do as a child also actually. Even when I was doing physics in Kharagpur, I had to do the same thing. I'm not sure how much change has come, but mostly it is somewhat similar. So I brought in, fabrication lab now. You have 3D printers, you have laser engravers and all kind of things. The modern things which can actually, you can make prototype. So these changes I have brought in, of course, we can't go into details here, but these are there on my website or in my blog. I have described in detail. So those changes I brought in. So now the second part is the acceptance of a student.
Yes.
As you rightly said that, yes, people go by the brand name. It's not necessarily that they want to do engineering, but they want an IIT brand name, then they'll do IIM brand name.
Tag.
It's always looking for the brand names.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're doing, engineering or they're creating a manufacturing facility or something like that, but they're just looking for brand name. So once they get that brand name, then they leave that area and go to something else. So here, that challenge is there. So, if we were to look at that, obviously we can't change that in 1 year. That will take a lot of time for that mindset to change. And but I'll just quote you one of my students, Paviter Singh. He is actually chief technology officer of a company called Sprinkler in Noida. He used to be my first batch student in 2001. And again, I'm not going to details of those, but it's quite successful now. And I got him into projects actually very early stage. So he, credits a lot of his success due to what I put him through. He told me last year when we started the computer science program that he wanted his nephew to get admission into this. And he actually brought his nephew to at the time of admission so that he can take admission. And then he told me that, right now is the first year of operation, so it's easy to get admission. I'm sure for after 2 to 3 years, it will be very, very difficult for the students to actually get admission. So I noticed 2 things. There are parents who actually were from this sector, IT sector and so on.
Yeah.
They understood the importance of this, not simply brand name. So they wanted to insist that their child should be studying here. And there are also some students, actually, many students actually even from school age now work in these areas. So they are also very excited to that. So people are knowledgeable, they appreciate the content. And of course, a common person may not appreciate that. So we are seeing the change happening, and we have much more demand this year as compared to last year. We are flooded with this. In fact, today morning also the director of School of Engineering Technology, I was discussing this, how to handle so much crowd, how to counsel them. So it is becoming a problem because too many people come in at this time. And the admissions have been prolonging because JEE examination is not taking place, Master Common Interest Test is not. So otherwise it would have been finished by this time and started, like Tuesday we're starting the classes for the old batch. By this time we would have finished admission and done. Now we have to do both the things. And that takes away a lot of energy. So this time demand is much more. And of course, we are finding it difficult to handle that crowd.
But I really loved your creativity in creating everything from scratch. It's really appreciable. Sir,
That was an opportunity actually. That was an opportunity because if the programs had been started and I had joined at later stage, it's very difficult to change. Fortunately, I got the opportunity to create from scratch because we're starting the program. And also management, I must thank the management because they did not start in the very first year, 2019, when I joined. They started in 2019. So I got 1 year time actually plan it out and do it. So that was very good. And if you can do it from scratch, it takes a lot of effort, but
yeah.
then you can actually make changes. Otherwise, you could simply copy somebody else.
I mean, it would take time, but eventually people will get used to it. Yeah.
Right.
Sir, so you started as a researcher and now you're into administration. Sir, I want to know about the transition and any changes that you have in your lifestyle or mood, or did it change your perspective in any way?
Changes have been there in the dress. So when I was in Gandhinagar, I used to wear t-shirts.
Yeah.
As a faculty member also. When I went to Delhi, then I had to become a little more formal. Now I'm vice chancellor, so I'm wearing this jacket.
More so.
But actually, to be frank, I've not changed. So I'm still a researcher, and I was a nuclear fusion scientist. As I mentioned, I was the first PhD from India in nuclear fusion. And when I came back to India, I was into my PhD work was in computer modeling and so on. And then when I came to India, I had to get into experiments, and I kept on doing things which I may not have had the expertise, but was needed at that stage. So I kept learning all the time, and I've been doing that till now. So even when I was in Delhi, I was heading an organization which was technology think tank. You would not see files on my thing, but you will see books. And of course, now computer is a very important part because a lot of things you do on the computer itself. So computers have been my part for a long time. They remain with me anywhere I go, whether I'm flying anywhere I go, the computers are part of me. And so even here also, actually, I'm involved with research work. Sometimes it may not be very path-breaking research, but even, for example, just to give an example, right now in my house, where I'm sitting actually, I'm also using this at my back. There's it's like a studio kind of thing I've created in my study room. And I'm working on a concept called Lightboard, which actually allows you to give much better online education. All this I'm doing in my home actually, and trying to improve the online education. Similarly, we are working on chronic health problems. We also submitted a proposal on COVID-19 treatment actually, along with multiple organizations like AIMS Delhi and so on. So again, a multi-crore project. So each of these I'm personally involved. So I'm not giving up research work. I continue to do that. I continue to learn. So that child like excitement I still carry with me. I'm very excited to be there. So for example, 2-3 days back when I wanted to work on this light board, I went to the shop myself. I purchased things, brought them. And I didn't want to waste any time. Within half an hour, I got it to set up and at least got the first prototype working. And I have to now still keep improving. And probably after this, your interview is over, then I will set up again and continue to improve the things so that I can share with my faculty members so that they could teach the students better. So I continue to do that. It may not be nuclear fusion all the time. My focus more has been on healthcare, also in education right now. But at the same time, I keep trying to improve the education system itself, either through development of technology or through the curriculum. So all of this is part of my thing. I'm not a real administrator. You will not see people waiting outside my room.
But real. So, but has your perspective about life changed in and the way you see the world as being into administration, being a vice chancellor, and being a researcher? Were the perspective different in both the fields? And now that you have combined both of them, are they overlapping or they are still the same?
So when I was in my school days, I just said that I was in a Gurukula style school. So at that time, I was trained to work with hands. Nothing was dirty. Nothing was untouchable. I have followed that principle. So I'm a person ground, I work at the ground level. And that has continued till now. So that has not changed. Of course, the experience that I have gained throughout. So while I was in almost till 2002, for almost 20 years, you can say that I was involved with nuclear fusion research, both in India and abroad. And then I moved to Dhirubhai Ambani Institute in Gandhinagar in 2002. I worked on India's moon mission. I worked on wildlife tracking. I worked on disability sector. My focus was always on nation and society. So whatever work I was doing was not really driven by public research, but it was to solve problems of nation and society. And that has continued till now. When I went to Delhi and I was in India Technology Think Tank, at national policy level, I had a lot to learn, which so it broadened my thought process. And that developed, especially working on technology vision 2035. But then I was involved with everything. In about 2 years' time, we actually got involved with every aspect of government, wherever technology was required. We were the chosen organization with climate change and anything else we were involved. So that helped a lot in developing my own understanding of what the nation needs. And then, as I said, that I wanted to implement some of this at ground level. So I wanted to come back to education, especially as a vice chancellor, because I wanted to make sure that I can make changes throughout the organization. So it's not just one part of it. And that's how I came as a vice chancellor to Pune, and we have been making changes here, which I believe would have a long-term effect on the country's education system. Fortunately, the new education policy that has come, we had also made a presentation in Delhi from TIFAC. It was a half-day session with them, because as part of Technology Vision 2035, we also had prepared the education sector document. So we shared the details of that with the chairman, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, said it will be very useful for this document. So a lot of elements from our document have gone into that. So that has also come in time. So hopefully next 2 to 3 years, 5 years, we'll start to see a lot of changes, which I have already initiated some of that. The flexibility has been brought into the system. So I'm still a researcher, I'm still a child, and I continue to enjoy that learning process.
Yes, sir. So initially you started as a theoretical physicist, and then in one of your interviews you mentioned how your nuclear fusion model, some scientists, they denied to experiment with it. So so I have two questions on this. So sir, did you always was it out of need and desperate times that you got into experimental physics as well, or because it was fine, like you didn't mind? Also, the second question is, why do you think other scientists were not ready to experiment with your model? Because even in the theory of relativity, Einstein, like back in then, they did not have any accessible things, or it wasn't feasible to experiment with things. So what do you think was a reason in your case that other scientists were not ready to experiment with your model?
So one thing I mentioned was that I came into nuclear fusion area out of a feeling for the country. And that was a choice that happened in the midnight with no thoughts. So when I came back to country and I had experience in modeling and so on, when I came back to country, it was just the starting of the nuclear fusion program. So not many people knew about that. So I was in Calcutta in 1987. The first reactor, it was a smaller one. So there are 2 reactors set up, one in Gandhinagar at the Institute of Plasma Research and one in Calcutta in Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics. So in Gandhinagar, the Institute of Plasma Research was set up exclusively for this purpose. Whole institute is devoted for this. In Saha Institute, it was part of a division which was created for this purpose called Division of Plasma Physics, and it was called Plasma Physics Program. So I joined Calcutta. I had offer when I was in US, they offered me a temporary position of 1 year. So I came to Calcutta. And 1987, this reactor was actually fabricated in Japan as per our requirement. And that came to Calcutta in 1987. And I was there in 1986 onwards. So I was doing modeling, but also to do modeling, I needed a computers. There was no computer. Only computer that I had was my personal computer that I had brought from US. So I got into trying to get computers there. Then you have to acquire data from the reactor. That system was not there, or the proper system was not there because it was too costly. So I started working on those. Then I could get computer system installed. I could get data acquisition system working. We got the reactor working sometime in 87, late 87. But it took me about a year's time to actually get my models to work on the new computer system because it was running on supercomputers in US, and we did not have that kind of computers. So it took me a lot of effort to make the changes. When we started to actually try it out to understand the behavior of the reactor, we were not successful. We were finding that behavior is completely different. And there was no way I could actually match the behavior of the reactor as experimentally observed. And finally, I gave up that model, that computer code, which has about more than 60,000 lines. I wrote a simpler model with about 500 lines myself, which had less number of parameters. And then when I was playing around with those, I found that, yes, now I can explain the behavior of the machine. And one of the reasons was there are a lot of impurities that are there. And you need to actually do a lot of cleaning to clean the impurities. So when I looked at that, then I had to have a system which will clean the impurities. So one of the scientists was to work on this. So I asked him that, when will your impurity cleaning system would be ready? He said it will take me 3 to 4 years time because I have to import another from US and other places. So it will take me time. I was not willing to wait for 3-4 years for him to complete that work because I wanted to see that how my model, is it really giving the right result or am I wrong? So I said, okay, let me work on this. I have no experience. So let me work on this. But only thing I decided that I will not depend on any component that I have to import because again, I will land up in same problem that I'm importing it to be very, very tough. So I decided that only those things which are available in India and preferably in Calcutta market, I will only use those things. And it was a very tough decision. So finally, I'll not go into details. I think I might have put in my blog or it's maybe in draft mode still. But actually, I landed up creating a system that nobody in the world had done. And actually, it not only cleaned the machine, it improved the performance of the machine, but also it was published in one of the top journals of the world for that purpose. So my insistence on doing it fast and depending upon the local components to save the time and also the money worked. And of course, it helped in the research. And then I got into that. Then, of course, I wanted to improve the performance of the machine. So I did many more things. And then later on, I was invited to come to Gandhinagar because the machine there, which was a much bigger machine, was not working properly for 6 years. So after I came in, I would again not go into details of those. Again, I'm writing a blog on this, which is not yet complete. I think when I got a chance to work on it, in 5 days, I could get that machine to work. Aditya took command. And then I was made project leader of that machine at age of 35, sometime early in 96. And till I was there, I was a project leader of that reactor, as well as a new reactor that was coming up, studied at superconducting tokamak, SST1 we used to call it. I was also project leader of the control and operation group. Right now, that machine is also operational in Gandhinagar. So my insistence on making sure that my main purpose of getting the reactor to work, I didn't want to divide myself between experimentalist versus theory person. I wanted to be able to do whatever is needed for that purpose. So the problem is more important, not my knowledge. If I have to learn something, I would go and learn it and do it. So that's what been my philosophy, that it does not matter whether I have the expertise or not. I can continue to learn and do it, and I'm doing it all the time till today.
Yeah, and one should never stop learning.
Sure.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the research situation in India currently? And what do you think, what are the challenges faced by the current scientists? Or because there are a lot of personal reasons also for them, because they don't get enough supplies, or sometimes it's not approved by the government, or sometimes it's a matter of money also. I've seen that. But some people are again passionate enough that they don't care about money, and then they get into research. So what do you think are the current problems and challenges faced by today's scientists in India and the whole area of research?
Right. So my own personal experience has been that if there's a will, there's a way. And so if we decide to do something, it is possible to do it. And Indian scientists can do it, and they are no less than anybody else in the world. And as you will see, for example, in the US itself, it's the Indians who have been dominating the research innovation culture, the companies, all of them. So it's a system. It's a system that needs as a human being, we are no inferior to anybody else in the world. The three things that happen in the system. One system is that so far we are still in the scientific research focused on publication only. Okay. It does not matter what is the impact of my research work. That is not being seen. So when you are going for promotion, they'll count the number of publications. When you go for jobs, they'll count the number of publications, but they never look at the impact. So in the US and other places, these systems have already changed long back, 20, 30 years back, where they started to look at what is the impact that your work is doing. So that is a major change. The second thing is that we tend to work for other countries' problem, not our own problem. Again, it's a long story, but I will not go into those details. But effectively, we need to make sure that we work on India's problem. India is a very big country with a lot of problems and so on, whether you take agriculture, whether you take health, or any other sector. Just to give an example, if I look at IT sector, 80% of India's work, at least a few years back when I was looking at a document, is to solve other countries' problems. And 20% of work is to solve our own problems. If you look at China, it is totally reverse. 80% of the work of IT industry in China is to help Chinese industry, and 20% of the rest of the world. And so our focus has to be on improving the country, focusing on our problems. And then there are certain social and cultural aspects which prefer certain kind of work and does not prefer certain kind of work. And that has to go into the home. I've been talking about working with hands. I talked about 1-in-1, that is 1 hour in 1 week, we should work with hands. You go to US, for example, everybody does work with their hands. You don't have servant and this and that. And focus on just doing mugging up question answers and going to exam is not as much. So a lot of children, they actually go and experience nature. They work outside. From age of 16, they become independent of home. They earn on their own. They'll work in restaurants. They'll work in different places, and they will support themselves. In India, actually, we support the children till they are independent of the parents. It may be 20 years, it may be 30 years, it may be 40 years. So we need to have certain social and cultural changes also to support this. So probably I don't have time to go into too much details, but these are the basics.
No, that's. But so what do you think it could be the solution for that? Is there any short-term solution, or is there, or it's going to take time?
So I think the National Education Policy is in the right direction, which actually is talking about changes from the school level itself.
Yeah, the new.
You will find that if you go into class 8 or something, or even earlier, students start to prepare for an IIT exam or medical exam. They go into coaching. They ignore the classes. 11th, 12th, which is a disaster, where actually most of the children are not even going to their colleges, 11th, 12th. They're just attending the coaching class. And so it's become like those getting into those exams has become the most important part of their life than learning. And then in that, you'll find that the labs and other things are completely ignored because you don't have labs in those exams. So the focus on practical work has been made a sham. And actually, I remember when I was in my school in physics lab, even at the age of 10, 11, I used to love doing that. After 40 years, I went back to school. I went to physics lab. I wanted to do some of those experiments which I'd done at that time as a child. And actually, I did that. So that curiosity has to come from doing, experimental thing, which the focus has completely gone away. So the changes that have come in are welcome in the flexible system that new education policy is introducing. But in our mindset also, the change is also the focus on certain institutions, which government also promotes. So, for example, IIT has become a brand name. There may be, you open a new institution which may not, a new IIT which may not have the facility, may not have the faculty members, but they will still go, the students will go there just because that name. It's not for learning. So, and same thing has happened. Unfortunately, the government also promotes those. So you will see posters outside on the road saying that, oh, if you can't get into IT, your life is gone. But is it really true? So actually, we need to have a level playing ground for all education institutes. Like in US, for example, when I looked at 2 years back, top 20 engineering institutions of the US, 19 were private institutes only one University of California, Berkeley, which I was I'm alumni of, was actually part of that team. So out of 2019, top were from private institutions. You don't ask whether Stanford is private or government. But India, we still have that focus on government institutions, government
Government or
supported
private,
everything.
yeah.
We have to go on to the fact that what is the merit of the institution, what is the education being given, what kind of research being done, what kind of faculty is there, rather than just going by certain names that have been bestowed upon them. So that is a major change that is needed in the country, a level playing field for everybody based thing. But I'm seeing the change happening. We have Geo Institute coming up, and there are other institutes of eminence that have been there in the private sector also. Hopefully in next 10 to 15 years, they would be moving ahead with the flexibility that government has made into this system.
Yeah, right, sir, totally. It's your mindset plays a huge role in these decisions. So you were part of you're working on sensors which were used in the Chandrayaan mission, and you also mentioned in one of your blogs that how enthusiastically you watched the whole mission along with your students. So, sir, how were you feeling? Did you regret not being the part of the final process, or were you just content and happy, seeing okay, at least it's working? Like, what were your exact feelings then when you were watching it?
I wrote a blog on this,
Yeah.
especially after we had an unsuccessful landing on the moon, and there's a lot of interest. So I've written a blog of my involvement on this. So actually, it was a very funny way that I got involved. It was sometime in 2006, 2007, when I was in Gandhinagar. I used to go to a space application center to actually give talk to in certain events. Especially those events where new trainees had come or new employees had come. I used to go as a guest lecturer, to give a special lecture, almost at the last day I used to go. And in one of those, I was working on sensor network for tracking of wildlife and agriculture and so on. So I gave a talk about that. And then toward the end, I mentioned that I don't know what is happening at the moon mission, but maybe this technology may be useful for the moon mission also, although I'm not aware of what is happening. So the gentleman, the scientist who was coordinating that effort, he told me that why don't you talk to the physicist? We are space engineers. We are transporters. We take the payload from Earth to the moon. But what happens on the moon is done by typically the physicists. So then after some time, he told me that Physical Research Laboratory, PRL Ahmedabad director is the chief scientist of moon mission. And that time Dr. Goswami was there. So why don't you talk to him? So I called up Dr. Goswami that I want to meet you and explained to him my concept, what I was doing. And I said that I'm not sure how it would be used. So he talked to me on phone only for about 20 minutes or so. And he said that, well, it sounds interesting, but we have no idea how it can be used. So that was that. And I kept throwing this idea, whomever I met, PRL people, Space Application Center, whenever I met them, I would throw this idea. Sometime it was September, October of 2007, I was in Spain when I got an email that can you come to a meeting in PRL where we are discussing Chandrayaan-2 mission. Maybe your idea might be useful. I replied back saying that, look, I'm not in country right now, so when I come back, I'll come and discuss. So when I came back, I discussed, and then they said that we are planning to detect water on the moon in what is called permanently shadowed regions of the moon. And maybe my idea might be useful there. So then I made a presentation, and then we worked together on preparing a proposal. And then the PRL director decided that I should be the principal investigator of the project. It was very interesting. I think probably I've written this in my blog also, that when I made the presentation about that proposal, which was a joint proposal of myself and the PRL scientist, the chairman of the committee told me that what nonsense you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. And then, the PRL director said that please listen to the whole proposal. And fortunately, then with PRL director's intervention, he listened to that and it got approved also. And next year, when I came back to give the progress report, the same chairman was supporting me when others were asking questions.
Yeah.
So when you go into a new area, you have a challenge, and people with the mindset, they may not agree to you, but you have to persist with that. So actually, when I was working on that, suddenly the mission plans changed. In fact, 2009, I remember March, probably I got the funding approval. And within 3 months, I got the email that the project plans have changed a little bit. You submit a new proposal again. And
Okay.
so I did then discuss with them and submit a new proposal, which are to look at seismic activity on the moon. And even before that could be discussed, sometime in March 2010, I got an email from ISRO scientist who was involved in Chandrayaan-2 that we want you to help with major part of the Chandrayaan-2 because mission plans have changed. And he gave a list of what things he wanted to do, and he wanted me to actually design a complete system, integrated system, which will do all those work. So he gave a list of 5, 6, 7 different things. Also shared that later in the blog. I was a little surprised that, you know, I'm not from a space agency. I'm not been working on this for a long time. Why do they want me to work on this? And so I told him that, are you, kidding? There's not even a first appeal. The gentleman was my actually, we were batchmates, not in the same institution. He was in IIT Bombay and I was in IIT Kharagpur, but in a summer camp we were together. So I just joked to him that it's not even first appeal, and why are you joking? So he said that, no, it's a serious thing. So I said, no, you please organize that time we did not have video conferencing like this. So teleconferencing we did. So 2 days later with the Chandrayaan-2 mission director, Dr. Annadurai, and deputy mission director and other people, I had a video at the teleconferencing. Then I saw that they were quite serious about it. And then Dr. Annadurai told me that we have been working on this after the change in mission has happened last 3 weeks. And we would transfer all the communication we have had in this regard to you. And then you take over. And then you submit a proposal to us, detailed technical details, the financial details. And so I remember it was around 15th March that actually after 3-4 days, I went to ISRO, ISAC it's called, in Bangalore. And I had a half-day discussion with the scientists there. By the time I had made some plans. And I put it up to them. And they said, you already made good progress in 3-4 days. So we'll give you 1 month's time. Within that, you have to work out the details. So I did work out those details. It was actually integrated system, which after landing on the moon, whatever experiments had to be done by rover, this single system of mine would be doing. So it will do multiple things. And it had to be integrated because of a lot of constraints. So that is what I did. I named the project LUSEX. I'll not go into details. Some of that I mentioned in my blog. Later on again in 2012, the ISRO chairman wanted me to work on this, but by that time I was already shifting to Delhi. It was not possible to take it up. So it was with a lot of interest that I was watching that mission. I wanted to be, of course, successful. But there's no regret because I went to do other things. And it's never that you work on a project like today, for example, we submit on COVID-19. We may get the funding, we may not get the funding. Right? But the fact that you develop the proposal itself is a lot of learning. You do serious, when you write a project proposal, there's a lot of learning that happens in that. So that is very important. It's not, the goal has to be learning. Of course, if you are able to successfully deliver that, it's even better, but it's not always possible to do that.
Yeah. So there was no feeling of missing out there. Okay, I couldn't be the part of the final thing.
Well, some emotional feelings are, of course, always there.
Yeah.
Because when I was watching on that, many of the faces were familiar to me and so on. But then, let's say when, suppose I was working on that project, I would not have probably moved to Delhi. I would not have been involved with national level planning. So while I could have contributed to the Chandrayaan-2 project, I would not have been able to work on the country level things. If you look at larger perspective, that is even as crucial as Chandrayaan-2 mission. So there's no regrets there in my life. Whatever has happened for good. So as such, but yes, it was a very interesting challenge, and still that challenge remains because even the system that was to go on Chandrayaan-2, which unfortunately the unsuccessful landing was there, was still not close to what we had planned at that stage, but just small parts of those. So still that work is relevant even till today.
And as you mentioned, when you were presenting, people didn't believe that could happen. So, and there are a lot of times when, since you're a scientist, so obviously not in your first go, you will have the outcome that you expect. So, and that would lead to a lot of frustration. Plus people people will often discourage you also and call you crazy sometimes, because you're a scientist. They face a lot of discouragement also from people, because they think whatever they are thinking can't be possible. So how do you manage that? How do you overcome the discouragement and frustration?
No, I'm not frustrated because I fortunately have had the opportunity to work in different fields where I have had no knowledge. So when I got involved with Chandrayaan mission, I had no knowledge about that.
Yeah.
I got involved with wildlife tracking. I had no knowledge about that. I got involved with disability sector. I had no knowledge about that.
Yes.
Right now I'm working chronic health problems. I did not have any knowledge when I got into these. But each of these, I have the confidence and the persistence of going to details. Thanks to internet today, the knowledge source is accessible to everybody. It does not matter who you are.
Yeah.
And so what is important is to be able to learn quickly and faster than others actually. That's what makes a difference, because knowledge is there all over. So each of these, what I have seen is that very quickly, in fact, when I asked the ISRO people that why do you want me to do this task, very critical task where I have had no experience, they told me we cannot think of anybody else other than you who can do the innovations that are required.
Yeah.
And just before that, in fact, in Rajkot in 2010, there was a space science symposium. And I had got into this, you can see that 2007, 8, and 9, I got the first funding. And they asked me to be the keynote speaker of the planetary exploration sessions. Again, I had the same question to organizers, why are you putting me? They said that all others we have heard, they do the same kind of thing. You are the one talking about new things. So we want to hear it. So actually Rajkot, it was sometime in February, third week that event was there, where actually I gave a talk on many things that are possible today in a space mission. And all the space scientists, especially the one working on moon mission, were present in that talk. So they heard that talk, and probably that gave them the confidence that I'm the one in the country who can deliver this. And this has been the case in wildlife tracking. Again, I had no experience, but within 1 year when I made a presentation in their annual conference, I was the last speaker because my work was very different. They couldn't put me in a slot. So last one, I was last speaker of the 2-day event. And when I finished my talk, and they had a system, they were collecting questions from the audience, which the panel members were to answer. While that was going on, the chairman of the session got up and said that while this is going on, I have something to say. And he referred to me saying the last speaker, what he's saying, it is sounding as if there's a third revolution that is happening in wildlife tracking. The first revolution was when the radio collars came in, second revolution when GPS came, and what he's talking about the third revolution. So I've been able to get into different fields in a short time and make contribution at international level. So that's been something that I have been doing whole life. So I've never been threatened by others. I have faced problems. I continue to face problems till today. But that has never deterred me from doing that.
So since people really appreciate your creativity and the way you think, have you ever felt overwhelmed by those compliments?
So actually the compliments are part of the thing. Of course, you feel happy. I especially feel happy when I'm able to make changes in somebody's life. And a lot of people, whether it is because of physical disabilities or mental health problems, or for example, you will see on my blog, I have talked about how to solve psoriasis problem, which I myself have. I never talked about it. But then 2018, I could, through an internet resource, I found a way and I tried it out. And I was successful. Then I opened up about it. I wrote a blog. And now a lot of people actually, we are finding that they are able to cure themselves of what they have been affected for last 20, 25 years. I keep getting comments, keep getting phone calls. Similarly, many other health problems, I've been able to help people. There was a case, a colleague of mine, she had a very young age, she had Parkinson's disease, and she has been improving a lot with some of the suggestions that I made. Again, I'm not expert of these things. I'm happy with the fact that I'm able to make changes in the people's life. And so if the compliment is coming from those people saying that, look, you have changed my life, I'm of course happy to do it. That is my goal. But not if somebody just for the sake of looking at, oh, he's a vice chancellor, let me go and tell him something nice. That's not of importance. Yes, if something I've done is really made a difference in life, yes, I'm happy to know about it.
That's really humble of you, sir. Sir, you have also mentioned about late Dr. Vasisht Narayan Singh. And He was a very famous mathematician, very renowned one. So, sir, one lesson you learned from him apart from academics, and an advice which you would like to share.
Well, with Dr. Vasit Narayan Singh, I shared two institutions. One was
Yes, sir.
Netarhat School. So he also went there. He was senior to me by about 13 years. In 1957, he went to school.
Okay.
And I went in 1970. So that time I didn't meet him. But I always heard about him from my math teachers. They would tell him he used to, Vasit Narayan Singh used to sit in this particular bench and so on and so forth. And then eventually he went for PhD to Berkeley. Later on, of course, I also went to Berkeley. So two institutions I followed. I used to hear about him, especially from one of my teachers, Mr. Manoj Kumar Dey. And I was his favorite student. Vasit Narayan Singh was also favorite student of his. At that time, Dr. Vasit Narayan Singh had come back from US. He was in Calcutta when he started to develop mental health problems. And so we came to know about all of that. But finally, I went to US myself, and then I didn't know much about Dr. Vasit Narayan Singh's life, except sometime around around 90s or 1989, 1989, he disappeared from the scene in the sense that he was traveling in a train along with his brother, and he got out of the train, and then nobody could trace him.
Yeah.
After 4 years, he was found, and because it was a big news. Later on, sometime in 2013, he had moved to Patna along with, he was not, actually he was married, but his wife, and they had a divorce at very early stage. So he was living with his younger brother and family members and his mother. They had moved to Patna. So I got a chance to meet him. And that's when I got involved with him, and I interacted with him. Of course, that time his mental health was not in good condition, but he still remembered few things. I talked about his Netarhat days, some of that he remembered. I talked about his Berkeley days. He would not respond to me. He would say his own things. So I'm asking something, and he would say his own things. But after 10 minutes, he came back and told me that, oh, you did PhD in physics from Berkeley. That was very tough. So I told him, no, you did from the mathematics, so probably for you it was tough. And then I did many things to help him in his life, at least for 5 years from 2013 to 18 with the help of my alumni members. We supported him, and I'm still very close to his family members. So the learning that I would say from his life is that he probably believed in something. When he was in Patna, actually, as a student in college, he used to ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
And teachers used to get bugged by him. But then he had already, gained a lot of knowledge. But he continued to persist that, and then the principal of the college recognized his talent and so on. Later on, very recently, maybe 4 or 5 years back, one of my teachers in the school, who was my house master, ashram adhyaksh we call it, he used to, the teacher's family used to live with us in the ashram.
Okay.
So all the 6 years that I was there, he was my distinct. From childhood, he knew me. He told me that in my school days, when I had to solve certain mathematics problems and so on, the principal of the school, we used to call him B.K. Sinhaji, he got a little worried that maybe this boy is also going to be in the path of Dr. Vasit Narayan Singh. He told my ashram adhyaksh, Devariyaji, to actually keep a tab on me so that I don't go into the similar situation. I don't face a similar situation, which I never knew actually. Only last 5, 6 years back, he told me about this. Of course, we are still close to our teachers who are in 85 to 90 years age group, but they all remember us. We always remember in touch. Last year also I met him when I was in Ranchi, actually, where he lives. So he was an inspirational figure from school days, which inspired us in something. Unfortunately, we lost him. At that time, I was in US when I got the news. In fact, I just visited Berkeley campus 2-3 days before he expired, and I was talking about that there. So he has been an inspiration from childhood to us.
Yes, sir. Definitely. And a lot of, I've seen even my classmates, they're too afraid to ask questions because they think they sound dumb or something. Like people are too conscious about it. Sir,
right. So I'm never conscious. I'm never conscious. I know that I'm a stupid person. I should ask questions which may sound stupid. But a very interesting thing, I'll take 1 minute of yours, is that When I go and give a talk on the same topic, let's say technology within 2035, to school children, to college students, and to faculty members. When you give talk to college students, sorry, the school students, you give a 1 hour talk, they'll keep you asking for hours until the teachers stop them and don't ask any more questions. They don't bother whether it's related to what I've given. They just have something in their mind they want to ask. You go to college, in 10, 15 minutes, the questions will be over. No questions asked.
Yeah.
You go to faculty members and give them talk. Absolutely no questions asked, because all of them are worried about their status, that if I ask a question, maybe I'm asking a wrong question, maybe my colleagues will laugh. So this curiosity we keep killing as we go along.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried, because I can say something. I don't have a label on myself that, I'm expert of moon mission, I'm expert of this and that. I'm not expert of anything. So I can make a statement which may be stupid, but I'm not afraid to say that.
No, you're just too modest. Because too many people I see are just so conscious all the time. Even me, like sometimes I get conscious. Like even talking to you, I like there was this thought at the back of my mind: what if I ask him something dumb? What if I sound dumb? But
no,
yeah,
you're very intelligent. You're not asking any dumb questions.
thank you. Since we talked a lot about education, and there's a new education policy which came in. What are your thoughts in? What do you think are the merits and demerits?
Well, to be frank, I have not had the chance to go through the full document.
Yes, sir.
But as I said that we had made presentations to the committee ourselves, and part of the recommendation that we have done has gone into that. I've been especially interested in the higher education field, because that's where right now I am. So that I've been following the draft document also. From the draft document to the final document, some dilutions have been there, maybe because of practicality of implementation. But it has suggested far-reaching changes which is needed in the country. The flexibility I talk about, the rigid system, we have tried to break away from that.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting good impact if the government is able to put through this in execution. The cabinet has approved, so that's a good sign, because last year on the 2019 budget itself, many of the important suggestions in the draft document itself was implemented by government. So that change, the government has been serious about it. So I'm happy about it. The fact that the cabinet is approved. I have not gone into details to see, for example, there was a concept of, we have a concept of affiliating universities, like a university affiliating, say, hundreds of institutions. And that is to go away, but I've seen that it's been made to be done in 15 years' time. I think in the draft document that was not there. I feel that 15 years is too long a time, because if you have to do an execution over 15 years' time, it just may not happen. And so it's been little diluted in that sense, maybe because of various pressures. But I would have thought that 5 years would have been a good time to implement things, because 15 years is too long, because the governments keep changing, the priorities change. So certain things have been diluted, but overall the direction is good. The thought process is good. We have been actually somewhat, I think, influenced by the US education system. It's considered one of the best in the world right now. And so that has influenced the system. And so I believe that it's all an effort in good direction. And finally, as you said, that it will depend on the execution part of it, implementation at the ground level, and how the successive governments take it seriously.
True, sir. So now I have very random questions for you. So first,
Sure.
I would like to know what you feel about the simulation theory, because there's so much debate on it. I want to know, since you're a physicist and into research and a scientist also. So what's your view?
So actually, I've not been following the simulation theory, so really I should not be making comment, because as a physicist, and right now I would not call myself a physicist also, because I'm working in different areas. You are specializing in certain area at certain time, and to appreciate somebody's work, you have to have the in-depth knowledge of that field. So if I make a comment which is half-baked, it does not make sense. So right now I would not want to comment on simulation theory, because I have not been following this in great detail. And so
What your personal opinion, sir? Like, would you want it to be true?
No, there's no personal opinion. It's in this there's no personal, professional. Everything is professional. So I would not want to comment into this, because unless I've had a deeper knowledge of that area to make a comment, because scientific things change also. Certain things we believe in at certain times, and especially things which are related to universe and so on. They're so difficult to comprehend.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about those things, it's not something that you can visualize. You cannot have a feeling. So many of these things are very uncertain. When Professor Jantu Narlikar developed the steady state theory of the universe, that was very appreciated worldwide. Later on with the Big Bang theory. Similarly, if you look at the particle physics, we have been discovering new particles and all those things. New understandings are coming in. So it's very difficult to say at what time we may believe in certain things. We know about Einstein's theory already. So these things keep changing. We keep discovering. Sometimes what happens that we find that certain things work, like classical physics works in certain domain, it is fine. But in certain other domains, you go into quantum physics state, which may not be visible at a certain level, but it may appear in certain situations. So our knowledge is always incomplete in that sense, and we keep making effort to gain more and more knowledge. And so it's difficult to at any stage to say what is right and what is wrong, because what may look like right today may be wrong, and what may look like wrong today may be right tomorrow. So as I said that, coming back, I will not want to, to comment.
So, but one hypothetical question as a follow-up. So, if let's assume it's true, so what do you think? How our lives would change? How would our perspectives change towards this world? Because then we would be like, oh my God, this is just a simulation. Maybe we would worry less, or we would worry more. Okay, what's there in the other simulation? If it were true, what do you think? Would it make
your tagline says some more Maya. Maya, but some more Maya. So you have already prepared yourself for that. That all this world is not real; it is all more Maya.
Yes.
So this has been there, that we're all we're not real people. We kind of it's all more Maya. So you have yourself answered your question.
Sir, my friends wanted me to ask you this question. So, sir, have you watched this show called The Big Bang Theory?
No, I've not watched that.
Oh, so basically they wanted to know your opinion on that, what you think, because in movies, shows, you know how they exaggerate everything. So tell me any movie which you watched where you thought, okay, this is too exaggerated, this cannot happen.
What I mean, for example, I'll give you a more recent movie that I watched.
Yeah.
Which normally I don't watch movies. I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I have put a projector in my bedroom so that I could watch some of these, but I hardly get any time to watch it.
Yes,
I have Netflix, I have Amazon Prime, I have Hotstar, everything I have subscribed to, but I hardly get time to watch those.
So you're too busy changing the real world in
whatever you can say. So when I'm taking a long flight, international flight, either from India to Europe or to US, then I get time to actually watch movies.
Yes, sir.
One of the movies that I watched is called Her, H-E-R, Her.
Yeah, he falls in love with his own artificial intelligence, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Right. So I give example of that actually. And there was another movie that was, again, something similar, where a robotics lady started to develop feelings. Ex Machina, or
okay.
Ex Machina. Okay, so I've known the Her, for example, that's something that we are coming close to. And so one part of that movie, as you said, that this gentleman who was in a state where he was having divorce proceedings with his wife, and he saw an advertisement for a artificial intelligence software, which was like a companion. And so he purchased the software. He's installing that software. This time it asks you whether you want a female, you want a male, and they ask you a few questions. So you customize it for you. And then that companion is everywhere you go. It's either a mobile phone, you come back home, it has access to all your information. And so it does many things. I'm not going to go detail. But at one stage, this fellow almost falls in love with that character. It's a lady character in that sense, it was customized to be a lady. And so he falls in love, but just like husband and wife or lovers, they have fights at times. So at one time he got very angry and he's asking this lady that, how many people are you in love with? So she says some 2,700 people. How many people are chatting with? So it says about 600 people at the same time.
Yeah.
So this I actually talk about, the learning process itself today with the help of AI and so on will become adaptable, customized to everybody's need. And this is something we are working in our university, where actually the AI system will make everybody look like they are one-to-one teacher to that student.
Okay.
And they can monitor the child very closely and make sure that the same Guru Shish Parampara that we have had would be their use of AI at a large scale. So Guru Shish Parampara had a small scale because one Guru cannot teach thousands of people. So this AI-backed system, along with holography, so one of the detailed project report that I prepared for Government of India on interdisciplinary cyber physical system, which Department of Science and Technology has launched some time back with about outlay of 3,600 crores.
Okay.
I put 25 grand challenges in that. One of them was multilingual holographic guru. So there this concept was there. That's a holographic guru, which is backed by AI. It will be customized to individuals and it will talk in the language of your choice, will monitor you as if you had a one-to-one guru with you. So that concept, the her concept, I always use to explain this. So similarly, Ex Machina itself also, the lady robot, she started to develop feelings. And so I had organized a discussion on this in 2015 on Future of Brain. I titled it as Future of Brain, a race between mind and machine, which is there on the YouTube. And there also we had this discussion whether we can see the AI becoming conscious, whether consciousness can come into AI system, just like human being. And there's divided opinion about that. So some of these two movies I have seen recently. Matrix, of course, I had seen earlier. A lot of things that we are seeing today were already shown in Matrix. So many of these movies actually are like science fictions, which may look like fiction at that time, they start to come true. But I've not seen these other movies that you're talking about.
So, but do you think we'll be able to achieve the very emotions a human feels? Because they're very complex, and putting that inside an AI and simulating that emotion, do you think that's possible?
So if you hear my talk in 2015 Delhi when I had organized this event, I started the event by giving initial talk. Then I had 4 panelists. One was, I chosen them carefully. One was Dr. Neeraj, who was, I think Neeraj Sharma. He was from National Brain Research Institute. He was looking from biological point of view. Dr. M. Gauri Devi, who was from neurological point of view. She was ex-vice chancellor of NIMHANS, Bangalore. Then we had somebody, professor of Allahabad University, head of Department of Cognitive Sciences. And then we had Geshe-la Dorji Damdul, who is director of Tibet House in Delhi, who is from the spiritual point of view and Buddhist philosophy point of view, which is the Dalai Lama's representative. So each one of them discussed this point. But I think people have opinion on this, but I think we have to wait for the time to tell how it's going to happen. So both of them, so one says that everything that is there in brain is what is dictating our consciousness. And so if I can create my brain in an AI system, it will have consciousness. But then there is something which says that, there is something outside the brain which has to be part of that consciousness.
Yeah.
So when you look at Dorji Damdul's talk, he talks about that. And he said that, no, everything is not here. There's something beyond this.
Beyond.
So there's a division among people right now on this. We have to wait to see actually whether it comes true or not. But it may be a situation that we are not even able to define what is consciousness. So that's also a debate.
Yeah.
So what is said also is that whatever way you can define consciousness, what is the test you will do? We will have a system that you can test and it will come out true that it's conscious. But what is real consciousness? We may not even know the definition of that.
True, sir. So since you have worked in so many fields, okay. So at what point in your life did you finally realize or told yourself that, okay, I've made it? Was there any moment like that, or everything you did, you thought, okay, I made it in everything?
No, there's no such moment. We continue working on things that are important or that interest us. At no moment you can say that, okay, I'm going to stop. As long as my physical and mental health permits, We continue to actively contribute. You may be in a job, may not be in a job, but you can continue to contribute. In fact, there was a time when I was shifting from Gandhinagar to Delhi, and for 4 months I was out of job because paperwork in Delhi had not been finished, and I had resigned from this. And those 4 months was actually, to be frank, when I look back, the most valuable periods of my life where I contributed maximum, when I was not doing any work actually. And some of the problems that I worked on health I could solve, and many other problems I could solve. So I worked with free mind, and as I said, that even if I'm not in job, you can be much more creative actually. So there's no moment of life in which you can say that I'm going to stop, as long as your physical and mental health permits.
Yes, sir. True. Sir, so sir, what advice would you want to give people who want to take up research, and even children who wish to become a scientist one day? And yeah.
So actually, I had given an interview on Rajya Sabha TV,
Yes,
the Eureka program, but they actually interviewed top scientists of the country. So I think it was 2015 sometime when I was interviewed on the program. One of the last question that the anchor asked me was that, what is the advice you'll give to young people? Now you are asking about who should become scientists on. I will not want to do that, because what I would really say that follow your passion, whatever it is. First, they should actually, parents and teachers especially, should be aware of theory of multiple intelligence, that each human brain is unique, each child is unique, each one of has certain unique characters. We should not be treated like a robot, that you become engineer, you become doctor. We should look at what is my inherent capability, and then use that to choose our career and also our learning style. And so following passion is very important. When we were child, we did not have too many options. Today, as the India has been growing, India is progressing, actually, it is possible for you to follow your passion. And for example, if you look at cricket players, today they are considered one of the rich people of the country. But you go into Gavaskar days and other people, in fact, somewhere on the social media, I saw a salary of people at that time, the test cricket players, it was like 2,100 rupees or something like that, which today's will sound very ridiculous. But most of the cricketers could not survive on just playing cricket. They had to have a job at the same time, because it was cricket was not giving them so much. Or a singer, or a writer, or a poet, each of them could not survive doing that task. But today with so many channels, including what you're doing right now, for example, people have this as a profession. People are YouTubers and others who are actually doing this as a profession. So you have a lot of opportunity. So at no point of time, Indians and world actually, young people have had this chance to follow their passion. But whatever you do, be the best in that. You cannot be mediocre in anything. So if you follow your passion, try to be as best as possible, because suppose you become a cricket player, but you are 2,000 player, probably you will not get a chance to be anywhere. You have to win at least top 100. Today, earlier it was top 11, but today with IPL and all things, you could be top 100, you could be winning. So you have to do the best. You have to devote your life. You should not do it half-heartedly. And so follow your passion. That's my advice to young people.
Sir, but you mentioned that whatever you do, you have to be the best in it. So, and initially when we started the interview, you mentioned how people shouldn't be competitive, some people. So, sir, if you're not competitive, how can, like, being the best, like this, like,
No,
how do they overlap?
See, in India, actually, the parents and the children, they are, parents put in the mind of children to compete with everybody. If you say that, okay, you come back to home and you have your results. So I always call it Varmaji Sarmaji syndrome. Okay.
Sharmaji ka beta.
Varmaji children, when they come, they will always say the Sarmaji children are doing better, and Sarmaji will say that Varmaji children are doing better. So we actually create competitiveness in mind of children rather than competing with each other. So we need to have a healthy competition, but it should not be that we don't cooperate with each other. So teamwork is very, very important. So I will quote Sam Pitroda here. He said that if you take one Indian, he or she would do more work than 10 Americans. You put a team of 10 Indians together, they will do less work than one American. So our teamwork is very less because of the so-called competitiveness that we put in the mind of children. So you have to compete with yourself, not with others. You have to excel. You have to improve yourself with whatever goal you have. Suppose you're in music, you have to practice. You cannot say that I'm a musician, but I will sleep and not do practice. So whether it's music, whether it's sports, whether it's science, you have to work hard. There is some amount of inspiration, but lot of perspiration that has to be there. You may have a talent, but if you don't work on using that talent, of course, you will not get anywhere. So
Yeah.
you have to be the best. For that, lot of hard work is there. And for that, I would also like to mention something. I've been working on holistic health. There's certain vitamin and mineral deficiencies have to be
Okay.
taken care in us.
Hmm.
And especially you'll see vitamin D and many other minerals. You'll see hemoglobin is low,
Low,
especially
yeah.
women actually. So we had in the part of technology vision 2035, we had the grand challenge, we had 10 grand challenges for the country. Number one was eliminating female and child anemia.
Hmm.
India is a country of anemic, especially women, and that
Yeah.
actually brings down your capability to work. So
Yeah.
we need to focus on basic health issues, which are very simple. You don't need a lot of medicine. You can actually take care of your deficiencies, maybe vitamin D, maybe issues of anemia and so on. So that is very important for you to be able to be active and participate in the events as you desire.
Yes, sir. Sir, my last question for you. Yeah, I mean, you did answer it, but I want a different answer because that was a part of a different question. Since my podcast is called Sab Moh Maya Hai, so which roughly translates to everything is an illusion. So, what concept you came across in your life where you believed in it, but then the more you went in depth and you were like, oh no, this is an illusion. So, what was it for you?
So at times I have come across a situation which I thought was a miracle,
What,
but
sir?
later on I realized it was science. At times I have come across a situation
Hmm.
which I thought was a miracle in some sense.
Okay.
That means I didn't understand what happened. It looked like chamatkar as we call it in Hindi.
Hmm.
But later on I realized that it was science. In fact, you will find one blog of mine which actually still talks about this. So a lady with a 15 years severe mental health problem
Hmm.
got cured by something I suggested her. And I thought it was a miracle because I was not expecting her. When I had suggested that it was for her to lose weight and few other health problems, but not to solve her mental health problem. But surprisingly, her mental health problem went away, which the doctors had tried for 15 years. So that blog I have written, when I wrote that blog, I thought it was a miracle because I didn't understand why it happened. But later on, I talked to experts and so on. They explained to me what might have happened. They did not know how it happened, but they explained to me how it might happen. They explained to me the scientific part. So sometime when you think that something is a miracle, something that is outwardly, later on you may find that no, there's a science behind it, just that we don't understand
Yeah.
that. So there have been moments like this, and you will see this particular example I've been still written as a miracle story.
Sir, but one follow-up question. So, since like it all boils down to for you that it has a scientific explanation. So, would you call yourself an atheist?
It's difficult question to answer because I don't put labels on myself.
Hmm.
But probably what I feel is that if I was to ask whether God created human being or human being created God, I think it's the second one, that is the human being created God and not the
Okay.
God. But it's an excellent concept, which actually is a way to actually keep society
Same.
in discipline. And like you will see, for example, like my grandmother used to wake up, she no more. She used to wake up early in the morning, will take bath as a regular practice, even if it was, winter time. And it was not with hot water, it was cold water. Okay. Today, most of you would hesitate to actually do this. You would want hot water and so on. I still prefer to take cold water bath. So that was something that gave you inner strength to do that, and that came from this concept of so-called God. But I may be proven wrong sometime, but my belief is that actually it's the other way, that is the human being created God. And it was good for good purpose in some sense. Of course, I would also that it has been used also or abused, that concept has been used or abused also but originally it was for a good purpose, and it continues to many people. It gives the strength, it gives the inner
Yeah.
discipline, without having a police looking after you, because God is omnipresent everywhere, right?
Yes, sir. Sir, I had an amazing conversation with you, and there was so much to learn from you. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm really grateful.
Thank you for inviting me, and I
Yes,
hope
sir.
that your audience would benefit from them.
Yes, sir,
I'm
definitely.
ready to come back and answer if there are a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So,
yes, sir, definitely.
thank you so
I'll
much.
message if anyone has any questions.
Sure, sure. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much.
Sir, I
Okay.
will.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.